This is a rare opportunity. CIWM working with I2I, we do that all the time. We don't do this sort of thing all the time, but I have to say we've trawled an absolute Class 1A roundtable group this afternoon, so thank you very much for making yourselves available. I'll introduce myself, although I think several of you already know who I am. I'm Steve Lee, I'm the Chief Executive from the Chartered Institution of Waste Management. Now if we can do the classic thing by passing the port to the left, if you can just say who you are and where you're from. We'll start with you, Jonathan.
Well, I'm Jonathan Straight. I'm the founder and Chief Executive of Straight plc, and we are the UK's market-leading supplier of waste and recycling containers.
Excellent.
I'm Jason Airey from CMS SupaTrak. We provide vehicle telemetry solutions to the waste market in the UK and across the world.
Hi there, I'm Julian Glasspole. I'm Managing Director of Vehicle Weighing Solutions, and we do onboard weighing systems and bin weighing systems. That's what we do.
Thank you, Julian.
Walter Stahel, the founder director of the Product Life Institute in Geneva, Europe's oldest consultancy on sustainable policies and strategies.
And Mathew.
Mathew Farrow, Director of the Environmental Industries Commission. We're a trade body representing a broad swathe of environmental companies, including many working in the waste and recycling field.
Stuart Hayward-Higham, SITA UK Technical Development Director. SITA is a waste management, resource recoverer and energy producer.
Excellent. Well, now we're going to introduce to each other as a group of British gentlemen, almost. We're allowed to talk to each other freely and frankly. We're here today specifically to talk about the export performance and probably more importantly the export potential of the sustainable waste and resource industry in the UK and the opportunities that we've got to realise that potential. Now I know we all love numbers, so just a few. The environmental low carbon and environmental goods and services market is currently worth about $1 trillion and growing fast, way beyond the rate of growth of most industries, of which the UK waste and resource management industry, it's worth, depending on how you define it, somewhere around $15 to $20 billion, dollars not pounds. And out of that, our current export performance is about $1.5 billion, about 10% of the value, which you could say is actually pretty good. A lot of industries would give their right arm for 10% of their value to be in export. But it's also quite clear that there's enormous potential for growth. Now, part of the good news is that at the RWM, in partnership with CIWM event that's held in September every year, people from 72 different countries turn up. And they don't do that by accident. They do it presumably because they've got some purpose in being there. They want to understand what the goods, products, services, the innovation in the UK, they want to know what we're doing, what we will be doing. They're looking to hook into UK expertise. They want a conversation with us. Now, as I say, they don't do that just by accident. So you being the experts, you actually talk to these people, it's your business too. Can you give us your perspective on what you think it is that they're looking for when they come to the UK? And in particular, why do you think they're interested in UK providers? And we'll do it in a fairly regimented fashion. So if we start with you, Jonathan, why are they coming here and what they're looking for?
Well, I think they're looking for innovation, and I think they find it in the UK. And I think very much the Made in Britain badge is a badge of quality.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Jason?
Yeah, I think I agree with John there very much so. The innovation that we have within the UK market, particularly from the supply chain, is key. I think also the other element, we're quite a mature market in terms of trying to drive down costs and increase efficiencies. So what we tend to find is that a lot of the companies we deal with abroad are looking to gain the benefits that the UK companies have got, from implementing the types of technologies we have, whether it be reducing fuel with our technologies, weighing bins with things like VWS and Julian's technologies, and that's quite key. I think the other good thing about the UK as well is it's very much, we have an open supply chain. So all the suppliers are willing to work together. So instead of just having little silos of separate suppliers, limiting what the overall benefit the customer obtains, by all the suppliers working together, they can give them multiple benefits. It's almost like the 1 + 1 = 3. I think that's kind of important because we tend to find, particularly across Europe, they tend to be silo-based supply chains, whereas in the UK, through a partnership that ourselves and like-minded suppliers like Julian put together at Optimised Waste Logistics, is very much about putting that together and saying, hey, this works with that, works with that, works with that. That's across the board, and that's very important.
That's an interesting perspective. They like the idea that the business in the UK is used to working between partners.
Correct. yes.
Okay, and that matched with innovation gives us an edge.
Definitely. With the customers that we work with, particularly in Germany and France, definitely.
Okay, that's good news.
Julian,
yeah, sorry.
I think UK is a great place to do business at the moment, and the workforce we have are very flexible, very hardworking, very innovative. And I think a lot of our foreign customers who come and see us like the fact that we can be flexible. If a customer wants to do something specific, we can help them do that. So I think there's an honesty in the way we do business in England. There is the credence that Jonathan mentioned earlier, but also there's a flexibility of a technology company that we can really deliver what people are after and do it quickly.
I like these words: innovation, flexibility, partnership working. They're all attractive attributes. Walter, I'll come to you last if it's okay with you, because you've got a unique perspective, viewing through the window. Mathew, what are they looking for?
Yeah, I think, like as the others have said, the openness of the British companies and economy is important in innovation. I think British environmental expertise generally has a pretty good reputation around the world, both in waste and in other sectors. I think also in some countries they're interested in how the UK has transitioned pretty quickly from a very heavily landfill-dominated system to one that has much more emphasis today on recycling and energy from waste. And I think again that makes both our technology and some of our services, environmental consultancy for example, of particular interest to countries that are struggling with similar challenges.
Okay, there are some interesting questions in there. We've definitely come a long way in the last 10 to 15 years. I guess two questions. Does that make us thought and practice leaders, or does it make us recent learners? And what's more attractive?
I think it shows that we took on a big challenge. We had to improve, as you and I both know. Recycling rate was something like only 10%, not more than 15 years ago. And I think it shows that people are interested in how, as a country, we got the politics and the policies and the investment right to make quite a big shift over that time. And people want to learn from that.
Okay. And Stuart, what are they looking for, and why did they look for it in the UK?
Certainly in our experience, they're looking for how do we consolidate, how do we pull all these things together, how do you put the bins with the bin lifters, with the SupaTraks, with the dynamic routing, how do you work across the supply chain, how do you bring new services, new technologies, new products to market, and because our market's changing so rapidly, and because we've broken many of the boundaries that exist in other countries in terms of, well, that's waste, you do that with it, and we were into, well, we can make that product, we can make this material. You're getting a lot more interest in saying, well, how do you do that? Well, how do you pull these two together? How do you make a solution out of 5 different things?
Okay. Well, can I pick up on the point that Mathew raised? He said that we've come a long way, we've introduced a lot of new thinking. I asked quite a difficult question. Does that make us leaders? Does that make us the technology market of choice for other people to hook into, or are other people in front of us? Jonathan, let's start with you. Are we leaders?
I think it depends what we're talking about. I think certainly we're leaders in some fields, in some areas. We're certainly not leaders across the board. There are particular things I think we do well, probably do better than anybody else. But almost certainly, if you're looking at the breadth of technologies and products and experiences, others have the lead in certain areas too. So I think we have to focus on what we're good at.
Okay, right. Jason?
I think we are, from a technology standout. I think if you look at recycling, it's the big question, isn't it? If you look at a lot of the mainland Europe countries, they're ahead of the game and they use technology in a better way. However, saying that, we're starting to look at recycling adoption rates. How do you measure those adoption rates? What's kind of interesting for me, because a lot of it's been forced in places like, say, Netherlands, for example, where a lot of them are paying for refuse that goes to landfill or isn't recycled to the kilo. They've looked at it, but what we're finding in the UK now, we've got to come up with other methods of doing it. And I think a lot of that's down to, dare I say it, the government doesn't have the will to push through. So if you take like the pickles money, for example, does that help to get recycling sorted? No, it doesn't. But what's happening over time is that everybody's starting to say, okay, we've got these guidelines on carbon output, recycling rates. Let's see how we can push that forward. I think there's a lot to be learned from the work that we've done, and when I say the common group of suppliers into Europe, to say, okay, we've done some great work over helping out the Germans or the guys in Netherlands, how can we use that in the UK now? Yeah, because the challenge is different, because at the moment it's not being legislated. Yeah, it's sort of being driven, isn't it? It's not saying you must paper way. That's the way it is. Yeah, as they have done in some municipalities in mainland Europe, and likewise, you know, in Germany, I think half the municipal bin collections have tags on them. Yeah, so that's something that they force through at that level. So I think we are in certain areas. I think the key for us now, my challenge, I think, from our business perspective, and it's sort of passionate really, is all about how do you increase that recycling adoption rates, yeah, and how do we use the technology to do that? I know we've worked on projects together, Julian, haven't we? Yeah. Measuring, you know, weights of recycling out of street segments, yeah, where you can actually say, okay, this street segment's great, this one's quite poor, and then how do you put incentives around that? So I think there's a lot to be done in that area. So for me, it's two answers really. Yes, in one area, but no in others. I think the whole recycling bit we need to start to catch up on.
Well, I can kind of tell that Julian's about to chime with that, but before I allow him to do that, look, I've got to jump in there and agree with you. I think we are pretty innovative in some areas. I think we're recent learners and adopters in other areas, but I also think that we're peculiarly British. We're very good at beating ourselves up, particularly when it comes to statistics, and using those statistics to try and compare ourselves with other near European, let's call them neighbours or competitors. I might turn to you, Stuart, and say, do you think we are unreasonably beating ourselves up? Do you think we're measuring ourselves comparatively fairly?
I think we beat ourselves up because we're very busy doing stuff, and sometimes we don't have time to step back and look. I think if you look at what we've diverted from landfill, we've done most of that in the reuse recycling arena, I think 74%ish, and not through energy from waste. So we started with a cleaner blank sheet of paper because we were late starters. We've tried to learn from other countries and other markets to deliver different solutions in different ways. But actually, you have to stand back and look at it and say, what have we done? I think on a comparator basis, certainly our statistics as a country aren't perfect. But I think the lack of a common measurement system across Europe does lead to irregularities in understanding who's leading and who's following.
Well, you're being very polite. I'd call it dangerous and questionable comparisons based on wobbly data and different assumptions. But let's go back to where we were. Julian, same question really back to you. Are we innovators? Are we thought leaders?
I think we are. I think the British people are thought leaders and innovators, whatever industry you're in, and waste is an industry that we're doing particularly well. And I also agree, we do beat ourselves up. We are recycling a lot more. We are diverting a lot more from landfill. And the figures from, there's a great article in the Telegraph on Sunday by your CEO, David Parber-Jones, where it said how bad we were doing in some areas, but then the rates are, I quote the figures, I think from 10% in 2010 to 42% in 2012. So that's a massive leap, and we should really be patting ourselves on the back for that sort of increase, not beating ourselves up, I feel anyway.
Actually, I couldn't agree more. And when you look at the stats and you burrow into them, we are recognised in Europe as being the fastest improver.
Exactly.
Now that doesn't happen by accident. Now moving on, I promised I'd come back to you, Walter, but not this time. Mathew, you raised this question about innovation and thought leadership. Do you think we are and aren't? Do you think that we're good learners? How would you typify the British market?
Yeah, I think no country is going to be the best at everything. So something like energy from waste technology, you wouldn't particularly expect the UK to be a world leader at that, given we haven't had a culture of that technology, although we have some good stuff coming through. However, wherever you look in the market, there's lots of individual areas where we are very impressive. So if you take something like recycling of construction waste, for example, I was in Egypt back in February looking at the market out there and talking to some of the Egyptian buyers, and they'd found a company in Northern Ireland who they felt had the best product in the world for recycling construction waste, and they were letting a contract outside Cairo for 5 or 6 sites. Now, you wouldn't automatically think we're good at that, but it turns out we've got something. Again, it's the innovation. Again, we've got some great innovative companies. I think, as Stuart said, I think the integration point's also important. Because we've had to do so much so quickly, we've had to think very hard, I think, about how these systems all come together and how, if you have a separate food waste collection, what does that mean for AD and so forth. And I think there's a lot of expertise in the UK about how you manage these systems, both in companies and in consultancies. And so, in Riyadh, for example, the Riyadh Waste Management Strategy is being done by a British environmental consultancy. So I think there are a lot of areas where we are very, very strong. Of course, it's not everywhere, but a lot to work with.
Okay, Walter, I did promise I'd come back to you. You're surrounded by a great wave of Britishness and positivity here. What's your perspective of the UK waste and resource management sector? What does the rest of the world want of us? What does it see when it looks at us? And do you see us as innovators, recent learners? How would you typify us?
I think the UK profits from the old prejudices in the positive sense that you are very open. You have always been known as very innovative in inventing, developing, not in mass producing it afterwards. You have excellent universities that are very open, so a lot of these people may have studied in the UK. You have more or less one language. I mean, Gaelic, most people don't speak Gaelic. But,
And people from Birmingham, yes.
and I think you have, it's sad to say, but I think you have one unfair advantage. You are not part of the European Union. Because a lot of people become very cautious about the European Union is bogged down with regulations, with all kind, and it's not predictable. Whereas the UK has a government that's known to be, let's say, industry friendly or economy friendly, open for innovation. And so that's a general picture. And within that, you have a good track record that you have been able to change in a relatively short time, make big progress, and which is the situation that most developing countries will find themselves in, starting from little, and they have to show results.
Okay, well, if I can sum that up as the fact that we're lovely people, we're incredibly clever and innovative, we kind of speak the same language, with the exception of those from the Midlands, and I'm one of them. Mathew has already talked about one specific market, and that was Egypt wanting to hook into construction and demolition processing technology. Can you tell me where you think the markets are? Are they in the developed world? Are they in developing nations? Are they in accession states, those that aspire to become part of the European experiment, if you like? Where do you think the markets are? And let's work it backwards this time. We'll start with Stuart.
I think they're all markets. I see, I do a lot of work with our European colleagues, and there's a lot of stuff that we're doing that we do have the ability, because of the market-based solutions that our government wants, to innovate and provide solutions which then get back imported. So I think that there is a more sophisticated sell into the more developed countries. But I see, we work in Oman, we work in Australia, we work in Hong Kong. They're all very different, and you may take Australia as advanced, but in many ways it's a different track to us, and it has a plain sheet of paper, and it has different constraints and different solutions that are required. And part of the great learning that we get is, and I've done work in Hong Kong and Australia, is they are different, their wastes are different, their society is different, their aspirations are different, and they come up with different solutions. And you step back and say, okay, well, that works over there. Would that work in the UK, or would that work in Germany? So there's a lot of cross-pollinisation. But I think they're all markets for expertise, and there's certain solutions and certain innovations where they are rolling out. RDF, for instance, which we've been exporting, they're now exporting from Australia, because you're making a fuel and sending it to people that need energy, and that's not a geographic boundary or political boundary issue.
Okay. Mathew, where are these markets?
I think, again, all over pretty much. I think a lot of the newer EU member states are struggling to work out how they can meet the European 2020 targets. And this links back to the point about looking to the UK as a country which, fairly quickly did go from a very low base to a much more respectable base. So I think a lot of interest there. China, I think again, China looking to tackle a great many environmental problems, but certainly we're seeing interest for some of our members' expertise around modern energy from waste, MBT plants in China. And then I think Middle East, where obviously they've got a lot of money to spend and they're looking to modernise parts of their economy that they feel aren't as modern as they should be. Hence trying to have much more developed waste management strategies. And then the more developing countries of Africa, where again there's a huge range of challenges, but I think there will be opportunities there as well.
Okay, Walter, who in the world wants UK expertise?
Well, let's look at the world. In 2100, the country with the biggest population will be India. And there you have, I think, an advantage because you have some old relationships. The countries number 2 and 3 is Nigeria and China. So Nigeria is, for me, a black box because it's very advanced in some areas, but it's a kind of terrorist country to in some degrees. One interesting thing, but it works for the technology side, is China has 130 cities with more than 1 million inhabitants. The US has 8 cities with the same size. And I think it's in these big cities or megapolis where the waste problem is the most acute. And so these are the people that are under pressure, also political pressure, to find solutions. And then I think then the natural advantages of England come in. In the case of China, of course, they don't trust the US, which is also an advantage for Europe. And I don't know, and I've seen the ICI, for example, as I think several of you have probably contact with China. So I think the Chinese market, China has another advantage. They don't use the Japanese approach of copying what you are doing. They will get into an agreement where you have to build a plant in China. And so they don't copy your technology. They will give you an opportunity, or you will give them an opportunity to build under a license agreement your equipment. But it's under your control, it's your technology, but they will not copy it the Japanese way. So it's a tit for a tat. There's always something in exchange. So I think the Chinese market is probably the most interesting one for the coming 10 or 20 years.
Everybody ends up pointing at China simply because of its growth potential. We'll come back to what the difficulties in that might be, but Julian, where do you think the markets are?
That's really interesting, Walter, because I've worked in China, but I haven't sold very successfully to China, and for me that's a market of high resistance. We're only a small company, we're behind bin weighing and weighing rubbish, so we're, compared to these companies, a lot smaller. However, for us, I'm taking path of least resistance. Middle East, they want to embrace technology, they like dealing with British people, and geographically we're in a good position to deal with that part of the world. Europe is just starting to buy systems from us, which is great news. And the UK is become very buoyant for us. The economy is better in the UK now than it was a few years ago. We all know that. And business to business, people want to manage what they're collecting. So for us, it's a good place to be at the moment.
Okay, and Jonathan, where do you think the market is?
Well, China's interesting. We don't sell in China at the moment. We buy a little bit from China, only a little bit. But if you go on Alibaba, which is this Chinese trading site that's about to come to market, you'll find some of our products, but they're not ours. And they're not even somebody else who's copied us. There's somebody else who is waiting to copy us when somebody wants to place an order. So I'm not so sure about Walter's point about the Chinese not copying. I think, give them a chance and they certainly will. Where we're not hugely successful in the waste markets is actually nearer to home. And we sell a lot of garden products into mainland Europe, into France, into Germany, into Benelux, and into some of the accession states. We very, very rarely sell any waste products because the markets tend to be very protectionist. Germany, for example, has its own wheeled bin standard, and it's a private little club that nobody who's not German is allowed to join. And somehow they get away with this under European procurement laws because nobody's dared to challenge. And secondly, when we do win, we're inevitably challenged until the client eventually goes out to tender again. Very, very difficult for us to supply in mainland Europe. And on the other hand, all of these European producers seem to have free rein to our market without any of these hurdles being put in the way. So there's a definite imbalance, and it's more difficult for us to sell into Europe than Europeans to sell into the UK.
I'd like to explore with you what makes for good partnership and good work getting into an export market. What do you need to get right? And who are we going to start with this time? We'll start with Julian.
In our experience, it's really been building long-term relationships with people we deal with, both in the Middle East, Europe. So all our agents, distributors, customers are people we've dealt with for a very long time, and we help and we support each other. It seems to work very well. I don't think there's any substitute for getting on a plane and going and see somebody and seeing what they need and how you can help them. So my advice is get belly to belly, go and see people, go and work with people, and that's worked for us anyway.
So as far as you're concerned, it's about relationship building.
Yeah, on trust and delivering on time and being innovative and flexible, and all the standard stuff to building a good relationship with the customer.
Right, well, we're jumping around now. Mathew, what makes for good practice in getting into an export market?
Yeah, I think the relationship stuff is at the heart of it. I think it's important as well in a lot of these markets to have a counterparty who can help you interpret the local culture, the local regulatory system. So, for example, my organisation, we work in China with a body called the Chinese Society for Environmental Sciences, which is linked to the Chinese Environment Ministry, very well connected, actually undertakes a lot of environmental testing for products for the Chinese government. And we talk to them about what the Chinese market needs and put them in touch with our member companies, including some in the waste sector. And they're very effective at actually finding the right people for our members to talk to, perhaps in a municipality, or in helping to explain that you're going to have to undertake some testing in China because although you've tested your product in Europe, the Chinese want to see it work in their own sort of context, as it were. So I think it's the relationships of people who can help you interpret local culture and customs is particularly important. And I think it takes time as well. There are probably some markets where you can just go straight in, you tender for something, you win it. But often you need to build up those relationships over time, and people, reward companies who've persisted and went in early, perhaps when it wasn't the most fashionable market, but made an effort. So I think those two things are important.
Okay. Jason, I had to take you not sequentially from Julian to stop you agreeing with each other. What makes for excellent practice in getting into export markets?
I think the key thing for us, if I talk about our experiences, fortunately working with companies like SITA, they've allowed us to go into the other markets with them, with their operating companies in those markets and prove it. You're quite right. I mean, even in the UK, you can prove it with one customer, the other one says, well, prove it with me. So they'll own territories, you'll end up doing it within the same country. So for us, it's about going with the customer, getting a good case study, where you've actually proven the technology in that country, and then working through local support, whether it be a dealer or whether you're working with your own local support, your own people that you employ. And then really thirdly is working through OEMs. One of the great things against the waste sector, most of the OEMs span across the world. So if you work with someone like say Giesecke Norber, for example, they have operations across Europe. So we've partnership with them. So as well as working with Citron, producing the case study, saying, hey, this is working now in Netherlands or within Germany, and create that case study. We've also got the backup from the people and the OEMs. I think that's really important because you're right, we don't understand that culture. We don't understand there's differences within those territories. And even within a country like Germany, they treat themselves as different countries within a country. And look at France, that's got its own problems. So it's using, obviously, the local knowledge. I think that's so important. Always go, my advice will always be, always go with an existing customer, because it takes a lot of pain out, and look for the right OEMs and partners to work with.
And
find the
OEM
right
being?
people, the regional equipment manufacturer. So I think that's so important because, again, they have the relationship.
So there's a good thing coming through here, whether it's finding somebody who's going to operate under license, finding somebody who's an established partner who understands the local legislation, culture, industry, yada yada yada, or whether it's working through a locally based outlet in an export market, finding a partnership of some form seems to be part of the key to success. Stuart, I've come to you nearly last. Does that sound familiar to you, or do you find something different?
It does. I think we have to approach it from a big company basis, and big companies, if they aren't careful, can be seen to be aggressive, overbearing. So I think for us, the keywords are respect. We had an interesting exchange of cards earlier today from two people that were inducted into Hong Kong society and how to exchange business cards. And although it's a small issue, it shows respect for the locals. And I think that's vitally important, that you understand and respect their traditions and methods of working. I think humility, for big companies, and even for small companies, is you have to understand their market and understand how your thinking will apply, rather than going and saying this works over here, it'll work over here, don't worry. Because often it doesn't. There are differences in the markets. Confidence, very much so, understanding the market going in, but having a local presence, be it with a partner or be it, as we do, having local presence and partners, so that it's not someone that flies in from London or Paris, it's someone who's embedded locally, and it is a long-term play. You're looking at 3, 4, 5 years before you become respected, because just flying in for a year and going away isn't what they want. They want somebody who gets to know who's there, who's attending conferences, who's talking, who's in their business. So I think it's those things that are really important, and then understanding how you can play within their market and their rules and regulations, which are different, and they play differently.
I have to say, this morning in our discussion, we readily bought into the importance of academia for 2 reasons. Number one, as a source of science, technology, innovation, development. Second, it's blindingly obvious, it's about building an understanding about resource efficiency, resource security, life cycle costing into the next wave of professionals, because there's another one coming in behind us, guys. But I also tried to sell to the group this morning that I think it's important that we've got a university for the over 50s, because there's still a generation that are doing today's business, so I don't think we get away scot-free. It's not just about depending on the next generation to do a better job about it than we did. But another set of snappy answers. Not a chance for you to advertise your brother's company or I don't know, a patent that your wife has just taken out. Give me an example of what you admire in somebody else of having developed an export opportunity. And I'm looking at my left ear, so we're going to start with Jonathan. Tell me about something that you've seen somebody else do.
That's a very tough question. I think I've admired the general pioneering spirit in selling British-made or British-produced metal waste bins around the world, and it's not just us that are doing that, but we're a very small part of it, but the whole industry has gone after these export opportunities, and Britain leads the world in metal bins, which is a tremendous thing.
Well done, metal bins. We'll go for Julian. Come on, give me a good example somewhere else.
I don't think there's one specific example, but travelling around the world, I see people want to buy British goods. People think there is a kudos to buying something British, whether it be designer clothes selling in China or cars or whatever. There's a definite kudos for someone buying a British-built product. I think that's great.
Let me test that then. There's something special about Britishness.
There is.
What is it?
Quality, honesty, innovation, flexibility. We're here to do business. We want to do business. There's probably a load more if I had a few more minutes, but we're good people to do business with.
Oh, we're such lovely people.
I think so.
Okay,
I think so.
Let's go to Jason then.
I think coming from Swindon's kind of interesting. We had the biggest press plant in the world, didn't we? At one point, got bought and went through various changes. But everywhere I go across the world is a mini showroom. Yep.
Yeah.
That encapsulates Britishness, doesn't it? Yeah, it's classless.
Okay, good, nice, snappy answer. Mathew?
I think I used the example I used earlier on of the company selling into Egypt, but also across the world, making kit for recycling construction waste. So it's not a sort of glamorous or sexy, innovative market, but by good British engineering and customer service, they've created a business there that is a world leader. And also they sell with integrity. So they were telling me quite often in some markets people will say, can we save some money by taking off all the safety guards? And they refuse. They say we will only install it with all the safety guards fitted. Now you might say that's obvious, but again it shows they would rather lose a sale than make any compromise at all. Even in countries where there's no regulation, so it's entirely up to the customer ultimately what they wanted. But they won't sell the product except to the highest possible health and safety standards.
Interesting. I don't want to make myself stand out above the crowd, but I find it all glamorous and sexy. I have to say.
Me too.
What a business. I could never do a normal job again. Stuart, come on, give me a good example of what you've seen other people doing.
I see at the moment, we've been talking about products, I see intellect. I see a lot of our consultancies based in the UK going abroad with the knowledge and selling that knowledge. And they're creating the basis of change in those countries, which then creates the market which we can then go and attack in terms of new services, new developments. And I see a lot of colleagues in our industry out in many countries helping them design their waste management for the future.
Okay. Walter, can you see anything good in the UK's performance in export?
Well, I think there is one quality attributed to British people, which is fairness. And I think that you can find in any kind of activity that and that comes from the education. There is something in British people that basically keeps them away from Italian or French ways of doing business. And I think this, especially with Asian people, that is highly appreciated, because the people, well, even in Europe now, people get more and more allergic to all the shortcuts and ways of cheating. Even the European Commission, I was in a meeting yesterday where the conclusion for the high-level civil servants in the Commission from the election last weekend is that whatever the Commission does has to become absolutely transparent. If people have doubts about the transparency, then the Commission is useless. And so that transparency is, again, like fairness. It's something that's in your education or your genes, but it's not everybody has it.
Trust.
Yeah.
Okay, two-party games now because we're running out of time. One-word answer. A market that you think we should keep a very close eye on because of its potential. And we're going to start with Stuart and pass to the right this time. One-word answer.
North America.
North America.
India.
India. Walter? You abstained. All of them. Julian?
Middle East.
Middle East.
Brazil.
Brazil.
South America.
South America. Okay. Two-word answer now. I want you to, in 2 words, give 2 attributes that you think make a particular strength for the UK in realising potential export markets. And I'm going to cheat and go first, which means I'm going to use the 2 easiest words. You can repeat them if you wish, but I'm going to say innovation and preparedness to adopt partnerships. I know that's more than 2 words. Innovation, partnerships. Stuart, sum us up.
Flexible and ambitious.
Flexible and ambitious, I like this. Mathew.
Openness and quality.
Walter.
Get key people from the key markets to this exhibition in September. But you have to invite them.
I made that 11 words, but I'll let you get away with that because you're special. Julian.
Honesty and fairness.
Honesty and fairness.
I think expertise and heritage.
Heritage.
Yes.
Okay, well done. Jonathan.
Pedigree and trust.
Pedigree, not the bitter, but pedigree.
Quite nice.
Track record.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. We're running out of time. Has anybody not had an opportunity to make a strong point that they wish that they'd been able to get out? Starting with you, Jonathan.
Well, I would say to develop an export market, expect the unexpected, and that's been our experience. Yes, get on a plane, go somewhere, but you're probably not going to end up with a distributor from where you've gone to. You'll end up with someone from somewhere else, but that's okay. And I think if you're prepared to be open-minded and expect what you don't exactly anticipate will happen, then you'll be successful.
I love this. Take the initiative and belly up. I'm particularly fond of belly up. Jason, anything you didn't get out?
No, I think the key for us, if there's any experience we've got, is stay focused. Yeah, work with your customers into different territories, and definitely look at the OEMs and find good people on the ground.
Okay, that's good stuff. Julian?
Agree with Jonathan, expect the unexpected for sure, and just get out there and go for it.
Yeah, okay. Walter, can you sum us up in 2 words? Anything you want to say?
Try to get people from your potentially key markets working either as executives, secondment, whatever, in your company for a year.
Interesting. In bed.
Yeah.
Not in bed, embed. Yes, okay. Mathew?
Slightly different topical issue, I suppose. I mean, we're talking a couple of days after the European election results. This is an industry in the UK pretty much, where its modern form comes from European directives and the way they've been implemented in the UK. Who knows, if we have a Conservative government post-election that starts to renegotiate, or the in-out referendum is on the horizon, will that change at all the way the industry plans for the future? Or actually are we now so well established on the path we've chosen, it becomes irrelevant?
Okay.
I don't know.
Stuart, any final words?
I think that hasn't come out massively to me that I love is this business is so exciting and the future is so great.
Yeah.
It's a great place to be.
Yeah.
It's stunning, isn't it? We're all junkies for it. I think we're all particularly lucky to be in this business at this time. And I keep telling people I don't think I could ever do a normal job again. I don't think I'll find one to match this. So, gentlemen, and we are all men today, but gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a fascinating discussion. I'm absolutely convinced we're sat on an export potential. I'm also convinced that we're sat on a very strong, interesting and vibrant national market. And I think that's a brilliant mine to dig into. And I want to thank you very much for your input this afternoon. I really look forward to seeing you at RWM 2014, and I wish you the very best of success in exports and home markets. And all that remains for me to say is that my name has been Steve Lee. Good night.